Diane Foster stood at her kitchen counter, sifting through the stack of mail that had accumulated during her week-long business trip to Chicago. At 62, she maintained the sharp attention to detail that had made her successful as a corporate attorney, now semi-retired and working as a legal consultant. The morning light streamed through the bay windows of her modest colonial home in Fairfield, Connecticut, catching the silver strands in her short, practical bob. Bills, advertisements, more bills, she muttered, sorting the envelopes into neat piles. Her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose as she examined each piece of mail with methodical precision. The phone rang, interrupting her routine. The caller ID displayed her younger sister's name, Beth. "Morning, Beth," Diane answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued sorting. "Diane, thank God you picked up." Beth's voice sounded breathless with excitement. "I've been trying to reach you all week. Did you get the invitation? Everyone's been talking about it, and I wanted to coordinate what we're wearing. You know how Caroline gets when we don't make an effort." Diane paused, her hand hovering over an electric bill. "What invitation?" A weighted silence hung on the line before Beth responded. "Emma's wedding invitation. It arrived almost 2 weeks ago. She's getting married in 3 weeks at the Ocean View Resort in Newport. Don't tell me you didn't know." Diane felt her stomach drop. Emma was her only daughter from her first marriage to David, who had left when Emma was just 7. Despite Diane's best efforts to maintain a close relationship, Emma had grown increasingly distant over the years, especially after she'd moved to Boston for college and stayed there. "No," Diane said quietly. "I didn't know." "Oh, Diane." Beth's voice softened with concern. "Maybe it got lost in the mail. Or it's somewhere in your house. Emma did mention she sent one to you." "Maybe," Diane replied, though a gnawing feeling in her gut told her otherwise. Emma had been acting strange during their brief phone calls over the past few months, deflecting questions about her relationship with her fiancé, Michael. Diane had attributed it to wedding stress, but now she wondered if there was more to it. After ending the call with her sister, Diane searched her house methodically, looking for an invitation that might have been misplaced. In Emma's old bedroom, now converted to a home office, she opened the desk drawer and found nothing. As she turned to leave, her eye caught on something white, peeking out from behind the bookshelf, a corner of an envelope. With a sense of foreboding, Diane reached behind the shelf and pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. It was addressed to her, the elegant calligraphy spelling out Ms. Diane Foster. The envelope had been opened, then carefully resealed. Her hands trembled as she removed the invitation card, confirming what Beth had told her. Emma Foster and Michael Chen were to be married in 3 weeks at the Ocean View Resort in Newport, Rhode Island. Diane sank into the desk chair, the invitation clutched in her hands. The last time Emma had visited was a month ago. She'd stayed the weekend, saying she needed to pick up some old photographs for a project. She must have intercepted the invitation then, deliberately hiding it where Diane wouldn't find it until it was too late. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her own daughter didn't want her at her wedding. Later that evening, Diane sat in her living room with a glass of red wine, the invitation on the coffee table before her. The house felt particularly empty tonight, the silence oppressive. She'd raised Emma as a single mother, working long hours to provide a comfortable life and opportunities she herself had never had. Where had she gone wrong? The memories flooded back. Missed recitals due to court appearances, arguments over Diane's controlling nature, Emma's rebellious teenage years. After the divorce, Diane had thrown herself into her career, believing that financial stability was what Emma needed most. Perhaps what she'd really needed was simply her mother's presence. Diane's phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "Did you find the invitation? Let's talk tomorrow about travel plans." Instead of responding to her sister, Diane scrolled to Emma's contact and stared at it. She'd never been good at confrontation when it came to her daughter, always afraid of pushing her further away. But hiding a wedding invitation was beyond a simple miscommunication. She dialed Emma's number, her heart pounding as she waited through 4 rings before it went to voicemail. "Emma, it's Mom," Diane said after the beep, working to keep her voice steady. "I just found out about your wedding from Beth. I found the invitation you hid in my office. I don't understand why you wouldn't want me there, but—" She paused, swallowing the hurt rising in her throat. "I'd like to talk when you have a chance. Please call me back." Diane ended the call and set down her phone, her eyes falling on a framed photograph of Emma as a child, gap-toothed and beaming as Diane pushed her on a swing. The distance between that moment and now seemed insurmountable. She picked up the invitation again, running her fingers over the embossed lettering. Whether Emma wanted her there or not, Diane made a decision. She would go to Newport in 3 weeks, not to cause a scene or ruin her daughter's day, but to offer a gift, one that might begin to bridge the chasm that had grown between them. What that gift would be, she wasn't yet sure, but it would need to speak the words that had gone unsaid for too long. 3 days had passed since Diane discovered the hidden invitation, and Emma still hadn't returned her call. Each night, Diane dialed her daughter's number, and each night she was sent to voicemail. After the 5th attempt, she stopped leaving messages. "She's just busy with wedding preparations," Beth assured her over lunch at their favorite bistro in downtown Fairfield. "You know how hectic these things get." Diane stirred her untouched soup, watching the steam rise and dissipate. "This isn't about being busy, Beth. She deliberately hid my invitation." Beth reached across the table and squeezed Diane's hand. At 58, Beth had always been the family peacemaker, smoothing over conflicts with her eternal optimism. "Maybe there's an explanation. Emma has always been complicated." "Complicated," Diane repeated with a hollow laugh. "That's one way to put it." The truth was, Diane had always struggled to understand her daughter. Emma had David's artistic temperament and passionate nature, traits that were foreign to Diane's methodical, pragmatic approach to life. As a teenager, Emma had labeled her mother emotionally unavailable, a criticism that had cut deeper than Diane had ever let on. "I'm going to the wedding," Diane said suddenly, setting down her spoon with resolve. "Invitation or not?" Beth's eyes widened. "Are you sure that's a good idea, if she went to such lengths to keep you away?" "She's my daughter, Beth, my only child." Diane's voice cracked slightly. "I've respected her boundaries for years. I've accepted that she needs space. But this is her wedding. I can't just not be there." Back at home, Diane sat at her computer, searching for information about Emma's fiancé, Michael Chen. They'd met at a graphic design firm in Boston, where they both worked, according to the few details Emma had shared. Diane had never met him, though they'd spoken briefly during a Christmas phone call the previous year. A search yielded his professional portfolio, sleek and modern designs for various tech companies, and a sparse social media presence. In the few photos Diane found, he appeared to be in his early 30s, with a kind smile and fashionable glasses. He seemed successful, stable, the type of partner Diane would have wanted for her daughter. Her cursor hovered over the message button on his professional page. Would it be crossing a line to contact him directly? After a moment's hesitation, she closed the browser. No, she wouldn't put him in that position. This was between her and Emma. Instead, Diane opened her email and began composing a message to Emma. "Emma, I've tried calling, but I understand if you need time. I found the wedding invitation you hid during your last visit. I won't pretend it didn't hurt, but I respect that you may have your reasons. I want you to know that I plan to attend your wedding, not to cause any disruption or make the day about me, but because I'm your mother and I love you. I've made a reservation at the hotel near your venue. If you truly don't want me there, I ask that you tell me directly. I deserve at least that much. Love always." Mom Diane stared at the screen for several minutes before hitting send, wondering if this too would go unanswered. The next morning, Diane woke to the chiming of her phone. A text from Emma. "I got your email. Can we meet? I'll be in Connecticut this weekend for some final wedding errands." Relief washed over Diane, followed quickly by anxiety. This weekend, 2 days away. Yes, she typed back. Just let me know when and where. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in New Haven, neutral territory. Diane arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a table by the window where she could watch for Emma's arrival. She ordered a black coffee and barely touched it, rehearsing what she would say, how she would maintain her composure. When Emma finally walked through the door, Diane's carefully prepared words evaporated. Her daughter looked both familiar and like a stranger, her dark hair now cut in a sleek bob instead of the long waves Diane remembered, dressed in a tailored blazer and jeans that spoke of her successful career in design. At 33, Emma carried herself with a confidence that Diane found herself envying. "Mom," Emma said, sliding into the seat across from her. No hug, no kiss on the cheek. Just that one word, loaded with complexity. "Emma," Diane replied, resisting the urge to reach across and touch her daughter's hand. "Thank you for meeting me." Emma ordered a latte and waited until the barista walked away before speaking. "I guess I owe you an explanation." "You don't owe me anything," Diane said carefully, "but I would like to understand." Emma's fingers tapped a nervous rhythm on the wooden table. "I didn't want to have this conversation. That's why I hid the invitation. I thought it would be easier." "Easier than what?" "Easier than telling you that I don't want you at my wedding." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Diane felt as though she'd been slapped. Despite suspecting this was how Emma felt, hearing it stated so bluntly knocked the wind from her lungs. "May I ask why?" Emma sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. "It's not just one thing, Mom. It's everything. The way you've always made me feel like I wasn't enough. How you disapproved of every choice I made that didn't align with your vision for my life. The constant criticism." "I never criticized you," Diane interrupted, defensive. "Not directly, maybe, but it was always there in your tone, your questions. Are you sure about art school, Emma? That relationship seems impulsive, Emma. Is that a practical career choice, Emma?" She mimicked Diane's measured tone perfectly. "You never saw me for who I am." The barista delivered Emma's latte, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. Diane used the interruption to gather her thoughts, to push back against the instinct to defend herself. "I'm sorry you felt that way," she said finally. "That wasn't my intention." "Intentions don't matter as much as impact," Emma replied, a phrase that sounded rehearsed, perhaps from therapy. "The bottom line is, I want my wedding day to be joyful. I don't want to be worried about your judgment or trying to measure up to your expectations." Diane felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I see. Do you?" Emma challenged. "Because for most of my life, I don't think you have." They sat in silence for a long moment, the ambient noise of the coffee shop, espresso machines hissing, casual conversation, the bell above the door, filling the space between them. "I've made mistakes," Diane admitted finally. "Many of them. But Emma, I have always, always loved you, even when I didn't know how to show it the way you needed." Something flickered across Emma's face, a softening perhaps, or just fatigue from the conversation. "I know you love me, Mom. That's never been the question." "Then let me be at your wedding," Diane said, leaning forward. "I promise I won't interfere or make judgments. I just want to see my daughter on one of the most important days of her life." Emma stirred her latte, watching the foam swirl. "I need to think about it. This isn't just about me. Michael's family is very traditional, very close-knit. The whole event is already a careful balance of cultures and expectations." It wasn't a no. Diane would take that for now. "Michael seems wonderful," she offered, "from what little I know." A genuine smile touched Emma's lips for the first time. "He is. You'd like him. He's thoughtful, grounded. She hesitated. "He actually encouraged me to meet with you today. Said I might regret it if I didn't at least try to work things out before the wedding." "I'd like to thank him for that," Diane said softly. As they parted outside the coffee shop, Emma hesitated before giving Diane a brief, stiff hug. "I'll let you know," she said, "about the wedding." Diane watched her daughter walk away, disappearing around a corner. The meeting had been both worse and better than she'd expected. Emma's words had hurt, but at least they'd been spoken. The silence between them had finally been broken. Back in her car, Diane sat with her hands on the steering wheel, not yet starting the engine. A plan was forming in her mind. A gift for Emma and Michael, something that might speak to both the past and the future, that might show Emma she was finally seeing her, truly seeing her. It would be a risk. Emma might reject it, reject her again. But Diane was done playing it safe when it came to her daughter. 26 years of cautious mothering had led them here. Perhaps it was time for a grand gesture, something entirely out of character for practical, predictable Diane Foster. She started the car, her mind made up. She had 3 weeks to prepare the perfect gift, one that no one, especially Emma, would ever expect. The attic of Diane's Connecticut home had remained largely unexplored for years, a repository of cardboard boxes labeled in her neat handwriting. Tax records, 1995-2000. Emma's school projects. David's things. It was this last category that Diane sought now, climbing the fold-down ladder with a determination that overrode her usual aversion to dust and disorder. The afternoon sunlight filtered through a small, round window, illuminating dancing particles of dust as Diane pushed aside holiday decorations and old suitcases. In the far corner, beneath a protective sheet, she found what she was looking for. A large wooden trunk with a tarnished brass lock. She dragged it to the center of the attic floor, her back protesting the effort. The key had hung on her keychain for 25 years, unused but never discarded. It turned with surprising ease, the lock clicking open. Inside lay the remnants of a life abandoned. David's life before he'd walked away from their family. His cameras, 3 vintage Leicas and a Hasselblad medium format, still nestled in their original leather cases, along with lenses, filters, and other equipment. Before he'd become an absent father, before he'd traded stability for wanderlust, David Foster had been a promising photographer. Diane lifted one of the cameras, the weight of it substantial in her hands. How many arguments had they had about these? About his insistence on pursuing art over a real job, about the money spent on equipment when they had a mortgage and a young child. The irony wasn't lost on her that Emma had inherited her father's artistic eye, his creative spirit, and that Diane had reacted to her daughter's choices the same way she had to David's, with skepticism masked as practicality, with fear disguised as wisdom. Beneath the cameras lay portfolios of David's work, black and white prints of urban landscapes, portraits of strangers with compelling faces, and most poignantly, dozens of photographs of Emma as a baby and toddler. Diane had forgotten how talented he'd been, how he'd captured their daughter's spirit in these images, her curiosity, her joy, her fierce independence evident even at 2 years old. There were photographs of Diane too, younger and softer, looking at Emma with undisguised adoration. David had seen what Diane couldn't see herself, that beneath her pragmatic exterior beat the heart of a mother, capable of profound love. At the very bottom of the trunk, Diane discovered a leather-bound book she didn't recognize. Opening it revealed David's handwriting, entries dated from shortly before their marriage until a few months before he left. "I shouldn't," she murmured to herself, but her fingers were already turning the pages. One entry caught her eye, dated just weeks before his departure. "Emma picked up my camera today. At 5, her hands are still too small to hold it properly, but she insisted. 'I want to see what you see, Daddy,' she said. Diane wouldn't approve. She's always worried about Emma breaking things. But I let her look through the viewfinder, helped her press the shutter. The joy on her face when I showed her the image she'd captured. It was pure magic. Maybe she'll be a photographer too someday. I hope Diane will nurture that spark in her, even if she couldn't in me." Diane closed the journal, her throat tight. David had been right about Emma's artistic talent and wrong about Diane. She hadn't nurtured that spark. Instead, she'd tried to redirect it toward more practical pursuits, just as she had with David. The realization sat heavy in her chest as she carefully repacked the trunk, separating out the cameras and David's journal. These would be her gift to Emma, Not just the valuable vintage equipment, but the legacy of her father's passion, the connection to a part of herself that Emma had cultivated despite Diane's influence, not because of it. Back downstairs, Diane placed the cameras on her dining room table and began researching. The equipment was valuable, certainly. Collectors paid thousands for vintage Leicas in good condition, but she suspected the true worth would be in what they represented. She found a specialty camera shop in Boston that could inspect and refurbish the equipment. The next morning, she made the 2-hour drive, the cameras secure in their cases on the passenger seat beside her. "These are in remarkable condition," the shop owner, an older man with meticulous hands, told her after examining each piece, "especially considering their age. Your husband knew how to care for his equipment." "Ex-husband," Diane corrected automatically. "And yes, his cameras always came before everything else." The man glanced up, catching the edge in her tone. "Sometimes our passions define us," he said mildly. "Not everyone understands that." Diane thought of the office where she'd spent 30 years of her life, the cases she'd won, the clients she'd served, how she'd poured herself into a career that made sense to her, that offered security and status. Was that so different from David's dedication to his art? "Can you make them work again?" she asked. "All of them?" "Absolutely. New light seals, thorough cleaning, minor repairs. They'll be as good as new, but it won't be cheap." "Price isn't an issue," Diane said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "I need them ready in 2 weeks." While the cameras were being refurbished, Diane tackled her next project. She retrieved boxes of Emma's childhood photographs from the attic, along with the albums she'd kept meticulously updated until Emma's high school years, when their relationship had begun to fray. She selected dozens of images. Emma as a toddler with paint-covered hands, Emma at 7 missing her front teeth, Emma as a teenager, serious behind her first camera, a budget digital model Diane had reluctantly purchased for a school project. She had the photos professionally scanned, then spent hours organizing them chronologically. Next, she contacted Emma's aunt on David's side, Julia, with whom Emma had remained close over the years. After an awkward beginning, they hadn't spoken directly in over a decade, Diane explained her project. "I have David's old cameras," she told Julia. "I'm giving them to Emma as a wedding gift. But I was hoping you might have photographs from the years after he left, especially any that show Emma's interest in photography developing." There was a long pause on the line. "You're giving her David's Leicas?" Julia finally asked, surprise evident in her voice. "I thought you'd sold those years ago." "No," Diane admitted. "I kept everything. I just couldn't look at them." "I have plenty of photos," Julia said, her tone warming. "David sent me duplicates of everything he took of Emma during their visits. And yes, many show her using his cameras as she got older. He encouraged her, you know, even when you were pushing her toward business school." The subtle accusations stung, but Diane let it pass. "Would you be willing to share them? For a wedding gift album?" "Of course," Julia said. "Emma would love that. I'll email you everything I have." The photographs from Julia arrived the next day, hundreds of images documenting Emma's relationship with her father during their sporadic visits. Seeing them was like viewing an alternate timeline of her daughter's life, one where she smiled more freely, where her artistic expression was celebrated rather than merely tolerated. In one particularly moving image, teenage Emma stood beside David in what appeared to be his dark room, both of them examining a print just lifted from a chemical bath. The concentration on Emma's face, the pride on David's, it captured everything Diane had failed to give her daughter. With Julia's help, Diane also tracked down David's current email address. He was living in Argentina now, having built a respectable career as a documentary photographer. Their divorce had been finalized 23 years ago, and they hadn't spoken in at least 15. Diane stared at the blank email composition for nearly an hour before typing, "David, this is unexpected, I know. Emma is getting married in 2 weeks to a man named Michael Chen. I'm not sure if you're aware or if you're in contact with her. I'm giving her your old cameras as a wedding gift, along with an album that includes photographs from both of us throughout her life. I thought you might want to contribute something. A letter, perhaps, or recent photographs you've taken that she might appreciate. She has your eye, your talent. I didn't always support that the way I should have. I understand if you choose not to respond. Diane. She hit send before she could reconsider, then turned back to her project. The album was taking shape, a visual journey of Emma's life, but more importantly, of her evolution as an artist. Diane had commissioned a beautiful handmade leather book from a local artisan, the cover embossed with Emma and Michael's names and wedding date. As she worked, Diane reflected on what Emma had said in the coffee shop. "You never saw me for who I am." And the evidence of that failure was spread across her dining room table. All these images of her daughter's life, her passion, her talent, that Diane had somehow missed or minimized. 3 days later, David replied, "Diane, your email was indeed unexpected. Yes, Emma and I are in touch. She invited me to the wedding, but I can't make it. I'm on assignment in remote areas of Patagonia until late July. I'm moved that you've kept the cameras all these years and that you're giving them to Emma now. It's a perfect gift. She's become an exceptional photographer in her own right. Did you know her work was featured in a Boston gallery last year? I've attached some recent images I've taken that she might appreciate, along with a letter for you to include in your gift. Thank you for reaching out. It seems we've both changed over the years. Diane hadn't known about Emma's gallery show. Another milestone missed, another connection lost. But here was an opportunity to bridge that gap, to show Emma that she finally understood what had always been important to her. The cameras returned from the shop a week before the wedding, each one restored to pristine condition, accompanied by certificates of authenticity and appraisal. The album was complete, a visual narrative of Emma's life and artistic journey, with contributions from both her parents. David's letter, sealed in an envelope, was tucked inside the back cover. Diane had no idea if Emma would welcome her at the wedding. Her texts had gone unanswered since their coffee shop meeting. But whether she was permitted to attend or not, this gift would be delivered. It was an acknowledgement, an apology, and perhaps most importantly, a recognition of who Emma truly was, not the daughter Diane had tried to shape, but the woman and artist she had become on her own terms. The morning before the wedding, Diane packed the cameras in their cases, wrapped the album in archival tissue paper, and placed everything in a custom wooden crate lined with protective foam. As she sealed the crate, she felt a sense of completion, as if she were finally releasing something she'd held too tightly for too long. Whatever happened next would be up to Emma. The morning of Emma's wedding dawned with perfect New England clarity. A cerulean sky unmarred by clouds, the June air warm but not yet heavy with summer humidity. Diane stood at her bedroom window, coffee in hand, watching the early light transform her garden from grey shadows to vibrant colour. She had received no response from Emma since their coffee shop meeting. No invitation, no rejection, just silence, which Diane had come to interpret as tacit permission to make her own decision. She had made reservations at the Viking Hotel in Newport, just 10 minutes from the Ocean View Resort where the ceremony would take place. The wooden crate containing David's cameras and the album sat in the trunk of her car, carefully secured to prevent shifting during the drive. Beside it was her suitcase and a garment bag containing the dress she'd chosen for the occasion, a dove-grey silk sheath with a matching jacket, conservative but elegant. Nothing that would draw attention or compete with the bridal party. Diane's phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "On our way to Newport. Sure you don't want to carpool?" "Already packed. Going to take the scenic route," Diane replied. The truth was, she needed the solitude of the drive to prepare herself mentally for whatever reception awaited her. Before leaving, Diane walked through her house one last time, checking windows and appliances with her usual thoroughness. In Emma's old bedroom, she paused, running her fingers along the bookshelf where the invitation had been hidden. A memory surfaced of Emma at 15, cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by photography books borrowed from the library, her face alight with discovery. "Look at this one, Mom," she'd said, holding up a book of Diane Arbour's photographs. She sees what other people don't notice. That's what I want to do. Diane remembered her response. That's nice, honey, but don't forget about your math test tomorrow. Emma's face had fallen just for a moment before she'd masked her disappointment and dutifully put the books aside. How many such moments had there been? How many times had Diane failed to recognize what truly mattered to her daughter? The drive to Newport took just over 2 hours. Diane followed the coastline where possible, the Atlantic stretching blue and limitless on her left. She kept the radio off, preferring to sort through her thoughts in silence. What would she say if Emma asked her to leave? How would she respond to Michael's family, who likely knew nothing of the strained relationship between mother and daughter? The wooden crate seemed to occupy its own presence in the car, like a third passenger, the physical manifestation of all that had gone unsaid between Diane and Emma over the years. Newport appeared on the horizon, its colonial architecture and Gilded Age mansions nestled alongside the harbour. The town was bustling with summer tourists, the narrow streets crowded with visitors exploring the historic downtown. Diane navigated carefully to the Viking Hotel, an imposing brick building overlooking the harbour. After checking in and arranging for a bellhop to handle her luggage, Diane kept the wooden crate with her, unwilling to entrust it to anyone else. In her room, she placed it carefully on the writing desk, then stood at the window, taking in the view of sailboats gliding across the bay. Her phone rang. Beth, again. "We just checked into the hotel," her sister said without preamble. "The rehearsal dinner is at 7 at some seafood place on the wharf. Are you planning to attend?" Diane hesitated. "I wasn't invited, Beth. Neither was I, officially. But Caroline says everyone's welcome. The groom's family is hosting, and apparently they've reserved the entire restaurant." The thought of appearing uninvited at the rehearsal dinner, of potentially creating an uncomfortable scene the night before Emma's wedding, made Diane's stomach clench. "I think I'll skip it," she said. "Let Emma have tonight without any complications." "If you're sure," Beth replied, sounding disappointed. "But tomorrow, you're definitely coming to the ceremony?" "Yes," Diane said with more confidence than she felt. "I'll be there." After hanging up, Diane unpacked methodically, hanging her dress in the closet and arranging her toiletries in the bathroom. It was only 4 o'clock, hours yet before she would try to sleep. On impulse, she changed into comfortable walking shoes and headed out to explore Newport. The town's famous cliff walk provided a perfect distraction, the 3.5-mile path winding between the sprawling mansions of the Gilded Age and the rocky Atlantic coast. As Diane walked, the salt air cleared her head. She found herself imagining Emma as a child, how she would have loved the dramatic landscape, how she would have framed it through an imaginary viewfinder with her small hands. Near the midpoint of the walk, Diane paused at a scenic overlook. A young woman with a professional camera was photographing the waves crashing against the rocks below, changing positions frequently to capture different angles. Something about her focused intensity reminded Diane so much of Emma that she found herself blinking back unexpected tears. "Beautiful spot, isn't it?" the photographer remarked, noticing Diane watching her. "Yes," Diane agreed. "Are you local or just visiting?" "Here for a wedding, actually," the woman replied with a smile. "I'm a friend of the bride, one of her college roommates." Diane's heart skipped. Emma Foster's wedding? The woman's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Yes. Do you know Emma?" "I'm her mother," Diane said, the words feeling strange on her tongue, as if she were claiming a relationship that no longer existed in any meaningful way. "Oh!" The photographer's expression shifted, a flicker of something, recognition, discomfort, crossing her face. "Emma's mentioned you. I'm Layla. We went to art school together." Art school. Not business school, where Diane had pushed Emma to apply, but art school, where she had ultimately flourished despite her mother's misgivings. "It's nice to meet you, Layla," Diane said, extending her hand. "I gather from your reaction that Emma has told you about our complicated relationship." Layla shook her hand, looking slightly embarrassed. "She's mentioned some challenges, yes. But she also said you were the one who taught her to be thorough, to pay attention to details. She says it's made her a better photographer, actually. The comment caught Diane off guard. Emma had found value in some aspect of her upbringing, had incorporated some lesson from Diane into her art. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt significant, a thread of connection she hadn't known existed. "Are you going to the rehearsal dinner tonight?" Layla asked. "No, I'm not. I thought it best to wait until tomorrow." Layla nodded, then seemed to make a decision. "Listen, a bunch of us are meeting for drinks at the hotel bar around 9 after the dinner. Just friends from college, nothing official. You should come. I know Emma would never admit it, but I think she'd like to know you made the effort to be here." Diane hesitated. "I wouldn't want to intrude on her celebration." "It's just drinks," Layla shrugged. "Come or don't. But in my experience, weddings have a way of putting things in perspective. Old hurts don't seem quite as important when you're starting a new chapter." They parted ways, Diane continuing along the cliff walk, while Layla returned to her photography. The encounter left Diane thoughtful. Perhaps there were more connections to Emma's life than she realized, more ways to bridge the gap between them than she had imagined. Back at the hotel, Diane ordered room service and ate by the window, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon, painting the harbor in shades of gold and amber. She considered Layla's invitation. Showing up at the bar later would be a risk. Emma might be angry, might feel ambushed, but wasn't that why Diane had come to Newport? To take risks, to make gestures that her cautious, controlled self would never have attempted in the past. At 8:30, she changed into black slacks and a simple blue blouse, applied fresh makeup, and slipped a small jewelry box into her pocket, a last-minute addition to her gift, something she'd nearly forgotten. The hotel bar was on the ground floor, a wood-paneled space with windows overlooking the harbor and soft jazz playing in the background. Diane arrived at 9:15, deliberately late to avoid appearing too eager. She spotted Layla immediately, seated with a group of young people at a large table in the corner. Emma was not among them. Layla waved her over. "Mrs. Foster, you came." "Everyone, this is Emma's mom." The group greeted her with varying degrees of warmth and curiosity. Diane recognized the social awkwardness of the situation. The mother no one had expected to see. Perhaps the mother Emma had specifically not invited. "We were just sharing our favorite Emma stories," a young man with glasses told her, pulling out a chair. "Do you want to join us?" "I'd like that," Diane said, taking the offered seat. "And please call me Diane." For the next hour, she listened as Emma's friends recounted stories from their art school days, exhibitions they'd prepared for together, all-nighters in the darkroom, critiques that had gone brilliantly or terribly. It was like glimpsing an alternate universe, one where Emma existed fully as herself, surrounded by people who understood her passion in ways Diane never had. "She was always the most technical of all of us," Layla said. "The rest of us would be experimenting wildly, and Emma would be meticulously adjusting every variable, documenting her process like a scientist." "That sounds like her father," Diane remarked, surprising herself with the lack of bitterness in her voice. "He was the same way with his equipment." "Emma mentioned he was a photographer too," another friend said. "Is that where she got her interest?" "I believe so," Diane nodded, "though I didn't always appreciate it at the time." The conversation flowed easily, Emma's friends seemingly content to include Diane in their reminiscences. She nursed a single glass of white wine, aware that she needed to maintain her composure for whatever tomorrow might bring. It was nearly 11 when the bar door opened and Emma herself appeared, accompanied by a tall Asian man whom Diane recognized from photographs as Michael. They were both laughing, their body language relaxed and intimate. Emma looked beautiful, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a simple white dress that Diane assumed was for the rehearsal dinner. Layla spotted them first. "Emma! Michael! Over here!" Emma's gaze followed her friend's voice, her smile freezing when she saw Diane sitting among her friends. For a terrible moment, Diane thought she might turn and leave. Instead, after a visible hesitation, Emma whispered something to Michael, and they made their way to the table. "Mom," Emma said, her voice carefully neutral, "I didn't expect to see you here." Diane stood, uncertain whether to attempt a hug or maintain her distance. She settled for a slight nod. I met Layla on the cliff walk today. She kindly invited me to join everyone for drinks. Michael stepped forward, offering his hand with a warm smile that revealed nothing of whatever Emma might have told him about their relationship. Mrs. Foster, it's great to finally meet you. I'm Michael. Please call me Diane, she replied, struck by his genuine manner. Congratulations on your wedding. An awkward silence descended. The earlier, easy conversation evaporated. Emma's friends exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to navigate the tension. Well, Layla said brightly, I should probably head up. Early start tomorrow for the photographer. Others at the table quickly took the cue, making excuses about beauty sleep and wedding preparations. Within minutes, only Diane, Emma, and Michael remained, standing awkwardly beside the now empty table. I should go too, Diane said, recognizing when a strategic retreat was in order. I just wanted to. I'll see you tomorrow, at the ceremony. She paused, then added, if that's still all right with you. Emma looked at Michael, some unspoken communication passing between them. It was Michael who answered. Of course it's all right, he said firmly. We'd be honored to have you there. Emma didn't contradict him, but neither did she echo his sentiment. She simply nodded, her expression guarded. Good night, then, Diane said softly, and thank you. As she walked toward the elevator, Diane heard Michael's voice behind her. Emma, give her a chance. Tomorrow's about new beginnings, right? She didn't hear her daughter's response, but as the elevator doors closed, Diane allowed herself to feel a cautious hope. Tomorrow would indeed be about new beginnings, not just for Emma and Michael, but perhaps for her and Emma as well. Back in her room, Diane checked once more on the wooden crate, running her hand over its smooth surface. Inside was a history, a legacy, a bridge between past and future. Whether Emma would accept it remained to be seen. The morning of Emma's wedding arrived with a gentle ocean breeze that stirred the curtains in Diane's hotel room. She had slept fitfully, waking several times from dreams where she arrived at the ceremony only to find the venue empty, everyone having changed locations without telling her. By 6 a.m., she gave up on sleep entirely, ordering coffee from room service and sitting by the window as Newport awakened below. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock, with a reception to follow at the resort's oceanfront pavilion. Diane had nearly 5 hours to fill before she needed to begin getting ready. Rather than sit alone with her anxiety, she decided to walk to the ceremony venue, to familiarize herself with the route and perhaps calm her nerves in the process. The Ocean View Resort lived up to its name, perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. As Diane approached along a winding coastal road, she could see white chairs being arranged on a lawn that ended at a stone balustrade, the ocean providing a dramatic backdrop. Workers were erecting a flower-covered arch where Emma and Michael would exchange their vows. Everything looked exactly as it should, elegant, tasteful, carefully planned. "Can I help you, ma'am?" A staff member approached as Diane stood watching the preparations. "No, thank you. I'm the mother of the bride," she said, the words still feeling strange on her tongue. "I wanted to see the venue before everyone arrived." The staff member's expression shifted, becoming more deferential. "Of course, Mrs. Foster. The Chen family has arranged everything beautifully. They arrived early this morning to oversee the final details." "The Chen family?" Diane echoed. She knew so little about Michael's relatives, having never met them. "Yes, they've been wonderfully involved. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Michael's parents, and his sisters too. They brought some traditional elements to incorporate into the ceremony." He gestured towards several red paper lanterns being hung at the perimeter of the seating area. "A blend of cultures," the wedding planner called it. Diane nodded, feeling a pang of exclusion. This was exactly as it should be. The groom's family actively participating, bringing their traditions into the celebration. In a normal situation, she would have been equally involved, collaborating with Emma and Mrs. Chen on these decisions. Instead, she was an outsider, learning about the details of her only daughter's wedding from a staff member. "Is there anything I can help with?" she asked impulsively. The staff member looked surprised. "I don't believe so, Mrs. Foster. Everything's been meticulously planned, but the wedding planner is inside if you'd like to speak with her." "No, that's all right," Diane said quickly. "I wouldn't want to disrupt anything. I'll just head back to my hotel." As she turned to leave, she noticed a woman in her 60s directing several younger people who were arranging flowers near the ceremony arch. Something about her bearing, confident, attentive to detail, suggested she might be Michael's mother. Diane hesitated, torn between introducing herself and avoiding a potentially awkward encounter. The decision was made for her when the woman looked up and noticed her watching. After a brief word to one of the florists, she approached Diane with a curious smile. "Hello," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Grace Chen, Michael's mother." "Diane Foster," Diane replied, shaking her hand. "Emma's mother." A flicker of surprise crossed Grace's face, quickly masked with politeness. "Oh, it's lovely to meet you. I wasn't sure if you'd be attending." The comment confirmed what Diane had suspected. Emma had told her future in-laws that her mother might not be at the wedding, perhaps had even told them she didn't want her there. "I wouldn't miss it," Diane said simply, choosing not to elaborate on the complicated circumstances. Grace nodded, studying Diane with intelligent eyes. "Michael thinks the world of Emma. We're delighted to welcome her into our family." "Thank you," Diane said, a lump forming in her throat. "Michael seems like a wonderful young man." An awkward silence fell between them, two mothers from different worlds, connected only by their children's choice to build a life together. "The ceremony setup is beautiful," Diane offered. "I understand you've incorporated some traditional elements." Grace brightened, gesturing toward the red lanterns. "Yes, just a few touches. The ceremony itself will be primarily Western, but we wanted some symbols of Michael's heritage. The red represents good fortune and joy in Chinese tradition." "It's perfect," Diane said sincerely. "Emma has always loved bold colors in her photography. She'll appreciate the visual impact against the ocean backdrop." Grace gave her an appraising look. "You know, Emma rarely mentions you, but when she does, she speaks of how you taught her to see details that others miss. She's quite meticulous in her work. Michael says that's what makes her photography so powerful." The comment, so similar to what Layla had said the previous day, caught Diane off guard. Was it possible that despite their differences, despite her failures to support Emma's passion, she had still managed to impart something valuable to her daughter? "That's very kind," Diane managed, "though I think her talent comes primarily from her father. He was the photographer in the family." "Ah, yes. The absent father who sent expensive cameras instead of paying child support," Grace said, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. Emma has shared some of her family history with us." Rather than taking offense, Diane found herself smiling ruefully. "That's a fair assessment, actually, though today I'm hoping to begin healing some old wounds." Grace's expression softened. "Family relationships are never simple, are they? My own mother and I barely spoke for 5 years after I married Henry. She thought I was marrying beneath my station because his family were merchants, not academics like mine." "What changed?" Diane asked, genuinely curious. "Michael was born," Grace said simply. "Some divisions seem less important when there's a new generation to consider." The implication hung in the air between them, that perhaps Emma's marriage and the possibility of grandchildren someday might offer Diane a chance at reconciliation too. "I should get back to supervising," Grace said after a moment. "The florists are well-intentioned, but need constant direction." "It was nice meeting you, Diane. I'll see you at the ceremony." As Grace walked away, Diane felt a curious sense of relief. At least one potential landmine had been navigated successfully. Michael's mother knew something of the strained relationship between Diane and Emma, but had been gracious nonetheless. It was a promising start. Back at the hotel, Diane found Beth waiting in the lobby, ready to accompany her to breakfast. "You're up early," Beth remarked as they were seated at a table overlooking the harbor. "Nervous?" "Terrified," Diane admitted. "I ran into Michael's mother at the venue just now. She was surprisingly kind, considering she probably knows I'm the villain in Emma's version of our family story. Beth reached across the table to squeeze Diane's hand. "You're not a villain, Diane. You're a mother who made some mistakes. We all do, some bigger than others," Diane said with a sigh. "I saw the wedding setup. It's beautiful. Perfect. And I had nothing to do with it, didn't even know what Emma had planned." "Today isn't about the past," Beth reminded her. "It's about showing Emma that you're here now, that you support her happiness." Diane nodded, picking at her breakfast without much appetite. "The gift is ready. I just hope she'll accept it." "The cameras?" Beth asked. "She will. They're part of her history, her father's legacy. How could she not?" "Easily," Diane said dryly. "She could take one look at me walking into that ceremony and decide I've ruined her perfect day just by showing up." "Stop catastrophizing," Beth admonished. "That's not going to happen. From what you told me about last night, Michael wants you there, and he clearly has influence with Emma." After breakfast, the sisters returned to their respective rooms to prepare for the wedding. Diane took her time with her appearance, wanting to look her best without drawing attention. She applied her makeup with care, styled her silver bob into a sleek, simple look, and finally slipped into the dove-grey silk dress she'd chosen for the occasion. The last item was a string of pearls that had belonged to their mother, clasped around her neck with fingers that trembled slightly. In the mirror, Diane saw a woman who looked composed, elegant, but whose eyes betrayed her anxiety. Beth knocked at precisely 1 o'clock, dressed in a floral print dress that complemented her more exuberant personality. "You look beautiful," she told Diane. "Very appropriate mother of the bride." "Even though I'm not really fulfilling that role," Diane said, smoothing her dress nervously. "You're here," Beth said firmly. "That's what matters." The wooden crate was too large to carry herself, so Diane had arranged for the hotel's concierge to have it delivered to the reception venue before the ceremony. Now, as she prepared to leave, she took the small jewelry box from the desk drawer and slipped it into her clutch purse, her mother's sapphire earrings, which she had always planned to give Emma on her wedding day. A hotel car took them to the Ocean View Resort, arriving 40 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin. Already, guests were gathering on the lawn, elegant in summer formal wear, greeting each other with excitement. Diane recognized a few of Emma's friends from the bar the previous night, including Layla, who was discreetly taking candid photographs despite apparently also being a guest. Beth led the way to the seating area, where an usher approached them. "Family of the bride or groom?" he asked. "Bride," Beth said confidently. "I'm her aunt and this is her mother." The usher's eyes widened slightly at the introduction, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "Of course, the first row on the left side is reserved for immediate family." Diane felt her heart rate accelerate as they were led to the front row. She hadn't expected to be seated so prominently. What if Emma was upset by her visibility? Should she move to a less conspicuous location? Before she could voice these concerns to Beth, a distinguished Asian man approached them, his manner cordial. "You must be Diane," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Henry Chen, Michael's father. Grace mentioned meeting you this morning." "Yes, hello," Diane replied, shaking his hand. "This is my sister Beth." "Welcome, both of you," Henry said warmly. "We're delighted you could join us for this happy occasion." His genuine welcome eased some of Diane's tension. Whatever Emma might have told Michael's family about her, they had chosen to be gracious, to prioritize harmony on this important day. As more guests arrived, filling the white chairs arranged in neat rows facing the ocean, Diane found herself scanning the crowd, wondering who else from Emma's life she had never met. There were dozens of young people who were clearly Emma and Michael's contemporaries, but also older couples who might be family friends, colleagues, mentors. A string quartet positioned to one side of the ceremony area began to play, signaling that the wedding was about to begin. The guests settled into their seats, a hush falling over the gathering. Diane sat perfectly straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart pounding. The officiant, a woman in her 40s wearing flowing robes, took her place beneath the flower arch. Michael and his groomsmen entered from the side, lining up near the arch. Michael looked handsome in a tailored navy suit, his expression a mix of nerves and joy as he took his position. The music changed to a traditional processional, and the bridesmaids began their walk down the aisle, each wearing a different shade of blue that complemented the ocean backdrop. Diane recognized Layla among them, having apparently set aside her camera for her official role in the wedding party. And then, as the quartet transitioned to the bridal march, everyone stood and turned toward the back of the seating area. Diane rose on unsteady legs, her breath catching as she saw Emma for the first time. Her daughter was a vision in a simple but elegant white gown, its flowing lines emphasizing her graceful figure. Her dark hair was swept up in a loose arrangement adorned with small white flowers, and she carried a bouquet of blue hydrangeas and white roses. But it was her expression that caught at Diane's heart, radiant, confident, her eyes fixed on Michael, waiting at the altar. Emma began her walk down the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no mother asked to accompany her. She was a woman making her own choices, walking her own path, just as she always had. As Emma passed the front row, her eyes flickered briefly to where Diane stood. For one heart-stopping moment their gazes met. Diane tried to convey everything in that look: love, regret, hope, pride. Emma's expression didn't change, but she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod before continuing to the altar. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, and for now, that was enough. The ceremony proceeded beautifully, the officiant speaking of love, commitment, and the blending of two lives and families. Michael and Emma exchanged personally written vows that spoke of mutual respect, creative passion, and building a future together. When they were pronounced married, the gathered guests erupted in applause as the newlyweds shared their first kiss as husband and wife. As Emma and Michael made their way back down the aisle, now together, Emma's eyes again met Diane's briefly. This time, there was something more in her expression, not quite a smile, but perhaps an opening, a possibility. The guests were directed to a cocktail area overlooking the water, while the ceremony space was transformed for the reception. Diane and Beth followed the crowd, Diane's emotions a tumultuous mix of joy at having witnessed her daughter's wedding, and anxiety about what would happen next. "See," Beth said, squeezing her arm, "you were worried for nothing. She saw you, she acknowledged you, that's a start." Diane nodded, unable to find words for the complex emotions welling inside her. She had seen her daughter marry, had witnessed her happiness, but the real test still lay ahead when she would offer her gift and with it a chance at healing the wounds of the past. The wedding reception was held in an elegant pavilion overlooking the ocean, where floor-to-ceiling windows captured the panoramic view of the Atlantic. Tables adorned with blue and white floral arrangements surrounded a polished wooden dance floor, and strings of lights twinkled overhead like stars. Diane and Beth were seated at a table with distant relatives from Emma's father's side, cousins whom Diane hadn't seen in years. The conversation was polite but stilted, everyone aware of the unusual circumstances of her presence. "Have you seen the gift table?" Beth whispered as they picked at their appetizers. "It's over by the entrance. I noticed your crate was delivered. It's impossible to miss among all those wrapped boxes." Diane glanced toward the entrance, where a long table was piled with wedding presents. Her wooden crate stood out indeed, its substantial size and craftsmanship drawing curious looks from guests passing by. "Do you think she'll open gifts tonight?" Diane asked nervously. "Probably not," Beth replied. "Most couples wait until after the honeymoon, but she'll see it's there." The meal progressed through elegant courses of local seafood and seasonal vegetables. At a table near the front, Emma and Michael sat with their wedding party, occasionally rising to speak with guests or share brief kisses that elicited cheers from their friends. After dinner, Michael's father stood to make a toast, speaking eloquently about welcoming Emma into their family and his pride in the man his son had become. Then a maid of honor and best man offered humorous anecdotes about the couple. No one mentioned the bride's parents, an omission that Diane felt keenly but understood. As the formal part of the evening transitioned to dancing, Diane watched from her table as Michael led Emma onto the floor for their first dance. They moved together with the easy synchronicity of two people comfortable in each other's space, Emma's head resting briefly on Michael's shoulder as they swayed to the music. "They look happy," Beth observed. "Really happy." "They do," Diane agreed softly. When the song ended, Michael's parents joined the couple on the dance floor, Michael dancing with his mother while Emma partnered with her new father-in-law. As the music continued, other guests began to join them. Beth nudged Diane. "You should go talk to her." "Not while she's dancing," Diane protested. "I don't want to interrupt." "Then when?" Beth challenged. "Are you going to leave without speaking to her at all?" Diane sighed, knowing her sister was right. She had come all this way, had brought a gift that represented so much more than its monetary value. She couldn't leave without at least trying to have a moment with her daughter. As she gathered her courage, she noticed Grace Chen approaching their table. "Diane," Grace said with a warm smile, "would you join me for a moment? There's someone who would like to speak with you." Curious, Diane followed Grace to a quiet corner of the pavilion where Emma stood alone, a champagne flute in her hand. Diane's heart leaped to her throat at the sight of her daughter up close, even more beautiful in her wedding gown than she had appeared from a distance. "I'll leave you two to talk," Grace said discreetly, touching Emma's arm gently before walking away. For a moment, mother and daughter stood in silence, the music and laughter of the reception creating a backdrop to their private tableau. "You came," Emma said finally, her voice neutral. "Yes," Diane replied. "Thank you for not asking me to leave." A faint smile touched Emma's lips. "Michael would never have forgiven me. He's been advocating for a reconciliation since we got engaged. He seems like a wonderful man," Diane said sincerely. "I'm so happy for you, Emma." Emma nodded, taking a sip of her champagne. "Grace told me you met this morning, that you knew about the Chinese lanterns, how they'd look good in photographs." "They're beautiful," Diane said. "The whole wedding is perfect." Another silence fell between them, less tense than before, but still weighted with unspoken words. "I brought you something," Diane said eventually. "A wedding gift. It's rather unusual." "The wooden crate?" Emma asked. "Several people have mentioned it, very mysterious." "It's your father's cameras," Diane said quietly. "All of them. The Leicas, the Hasselblad. Everything I kept after he left. I had them all refurbished, cleaned, restored to working condition." Emma's eyes widened, her composure slipping for the first time. "Dad's Leicas? You still have them? I always assumed you'd sold them years ago." "No." Diane shook her head. "I kept everything. I couldn't, even when I was angriest with him, I couldn't get rid of them. Maybe I always knew they were meant for you someday." Emma blinked rapidly, emotion finally breaking through her careful facade. "I don't understand. You never supported my photography. You always pushed me toward more practical careers." "I know," Diane acknowledged. "I was wrong, Emma. So wrong. I let my bitterness toward your father affect how I responded to your passion. I was afraid you'd end up hurt, struggling like he did, but all I did was hurt you myself." A tear slipped down Emma's cheek, which she quickly brushed away. "It took me years to stop seeking your approval, to believe in my own talent." "And look what you've accomplished," Diane said, gesturing around the beautiful reception at the life Emma had built. "Without my support, despite my doubts. I'm so proud of you, Emma. I should have told you that years ago." Emma studied her mother's face, searching for sincerity. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. "Thank you for coming today. And for the cameras, it's an incredible gift. There's an album too," Diane added. "Photos from your childhood from both me and your father. And some from your Aunt Julia that I never knew existed. Of you and your dad, working in his darkroom, learning to use his cameras." Emma's breath caught. "I'd love to see those. And this." Diane reached into her purse and withdrew the small jewelry box. "These were your grandmother's. I always planned to give them to you on your wedding day." Emma accepted the box, opening it to reveal the sapphire earrings. "They're beautiful," she whispered. A voice interrupted them. Michael, approaching with a warm smile. "Sorry to intrude. They're asking for us to cut the cake." Emma nodded, then turned back to Diane. Would you like to come with us? Stand with the family for the photos?" The invitation, so simple yet so profound, brought tears to Diane's eyes. "I'd be honored." As they walked together toward the center of the reception, Emma spoke without looking at her mother. "This doesn't fix everything, you know. We still have a lot to work through." "I know," Diane agreed, "but it's a start." Emma nodded, and then, in a gesture that caught Diane completely by surprise, she reached out and took her mother's hand, squeezing it briefly before letting go. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It wasn't the full reconciliation Diane had hoped for, but it was an opening, a chance, a new beginning. As Emma and Michael cut their wedding cake to the cheers of their guests, Diane stood nearby, watching her daughter's radiant smile. The gift she had brought, the cameras, the photos, the legacy of a passion that had skipped from father to daughter, had opened a door she had feared permanently closed. The real gift, though, had been Emma's willingness to open it, to take the first tentative step across the threshold of their damaged relationship. Whatever came next, they would build it together, one moment, one conversation, one shared memory at a time. As pieces of cake were distributed and champagne flowed, Diane caught Grace Chen's eye across the room. The other mother smiled and raised her glass in a small, private toast. Diane returned the gesture, feeling for the first time in years that she was exactly where she belonged, at her daughter's wedding, witnessing not just the beginning of Emma's new life with Michael, but perhaps the beginning of a new chapter in their own story as well. The gift no one had expected wasn't just the cameras in their wooden crate. It was the gift of second chances, of bridges rebuilt, of love that persisted despite years of misunderstanding and hurt. It was the most valuable gift of all, the possibility of tomorrow.